Hi guys, my name is Bobby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my October wrap-up. Now in October I did two different readathons, Spook Athan and Boo-athon. I did way better at Boo-athon than I did at Spook Athan. And I only read two other books before the two readathons. So most of this wrap-up is going to be my readathon wrap-ups. So the first book I read in the month of October was Saga Volume 9 by, I don't even know what it's by. Oh, by Brian K. Vaughan, and I do not remember who the artist is. This is not the last volume, but the current volume that just came out, and then they're taking a year off before they put out another one. And I blame this read on Maddie over the book pusher, because she read it, and she said she felt all the feelings, and so she wanted somebody else to read it so that they could discuss it. And I already had it on my TBR. Like, I love the Saga series. Saga is one of the best graphic novel series that I've ever read. If you have lived under a rock and you've never heard of the Saga series, it's about these two warring planets. One's a moon and one's a planet. And they have two different species from each, and they're fighting against each other, and they have been for years. And there's two characters, one from each planet, and they fall in love, and they get married, and they have a kid. And the whole story is told from their child's point of view, from the time that her parents met, like, all the way up. And it is one of the weirdest series ever. I wouldn't call it a space opera, but it's close. Like, there's all sorts of different crazy weird like alien characters, and it's very sexually explicit. It's definitely M for mature. Like, it is not for kids at all. Lots of swearing, gore, sex, like it's got it all, but it is so good. So I read volume 9 and I want to kill Maddie now because that ending, oh, it was like heartbreaking, like cliffhanger, like what the actual fuck. Like I want them. And they're taking a year off. Like, what the hell? Thanks a lot, Maddie. Thanks. You're super cool. So I read that right away. Read it in one sitting, like in 15 minutes. And then was sobbing my eyes out. Was freaking out. Because I was like, oh, what the heck am I supposed to do now? It's her fault. It's Maddie's fault. But anyways, 5 stars. Obviously. Absolutely loved it. I might have given it 4 stars. Because that ending pissed me off. Because then now I have to wait. But I'm pretty sure I gave it 4, 4.5. I don't know. I don't feel like looking at my Goodreads right now. The next book that I read in October, I ended up DNFing, and that was The Finishing School by Joanna Goodman. There wasn't anything wrong with this book. Like, it's not that it was bad, but I think it only got about 100 pages in maybe. But it was way too much like The Broken Girls by, what is it, S.L. James? I don't know, it was one of my book of the month. I read it like 2 or 3 months ago. But it was too much like The Broken Girls. I mean, it almost the exact same premise, only this boarding school is in Sweden, but it's back and forth. Like, it follows the main character, and one of her best friends died while she was in boarding school in Sweden, and it, you know, like, it goes back in time to the 90s to when they were in the boarding school and, like, leading up to what happened, and then now they're coming back for, I think it's the 100th anniversary of the boarding school or whatever, and so all these like famous alumni are coming back, and she's an author, so she is considered one of the famous alumni. So I DNF'd it only because it was so much like The Broken Girls that I didn't want to read the same story again, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, there were little subtle differences and stuff. Like, it wasn't, I mean, there is a murder mystery because you're trying to figure out what happened to this girl. My guess is either she's not really dead or there was a reason, like some secret reason behind. I didn't get far enough to figure it out, so I ended up DNFing it, unfortunately. The next books that I read were part of Spook Athan, so let me get my phone because I have to pull up all of the challenges and all that. So the first thing that I read for Spook Athan covered the challenge of reading a book with pictures in it, and that was I Hate Fairyland Volume 4, Sadly Never After. This is the very last book in the graphic novel series, which makes me really sad. It's one of my favorite graphic novel series. Oh, it's by Scotty Young. It is so, so good. It's about this girl named Gertrude who, when she's 9 years old, gets sucked through a portal in her bedroom and is deposited into Fairyland. Almost everybody loves going to Fairyland. All the children do because it's fun and it's full of fairy tale characters and cotton candy and all this fun stuff. Well, she gets down in there and they get a guide, and hers is like this little fly that chain smokes cigars. The little guide takes her around Fairyland, and the whole goal is to find your key to your door, and then you get to go back home. Most children do it in like a day, 2 days, a week tops. It's 40 years later, and Gertrude is still there. So she's very bitter. She's very angry. She's like a 40-year-old woman stuck in a 9-year-old's body. absolutely can't stand fairyland, and so she just goes through it destroying everything in her path. So it's bloody, it's gory. I love that there's made up swear words. So instead of saying go fuck yourself, they say go fluff yourself. So I mean, it's kind of cute where they make up the fake swear words instead of actually swearing. But it's definitely mature content. It's, you know, it's not for kids. But I'm really sad that it's the last one. I feel like the last one, I mean, I think I only gave it 4 stars because it seemed like it wrapped it up too quick. Like, not that it was unfinished, but kind of. Like, it was just wrapped up really too fast for my taste. And, you know, I guess she got the ending that I thought she was going to get, kind of. I kind of almost hoped that she would have ruled over Fairyland forever and just make it into this monstrous, horrible place. But, of course, that didn't happen. But I highly recommend reading I Hate Fairyland, the series. It is so, so good. It is so funny. And I love the little jokes that they insert in there. It's a really great series. I'm really sad that it's over. Next book that I read for Spook Athan was, and this covers the read a book with a spooky word in the title, was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna McGuire. I didn't actually finish this, which is absolutely ridiculous because it's so short. I read it about halfway through, and it wasn't that the story was bad because I love this series. I just wasn't in the mood for it. Like, it was just one of those things where I just wasn't in the mood for it, wasn't into it, and I didn't want my bad reading mood taint the story to where I just stopped reading the series because I really do enjoy the series. So I read about halfway through this one and then kind of set it to the side. So I kind of failed the challenge, read a book with a spooky word in the title, because the other books I read don't have a spooky word in the title. But yeah, so this one was kind of a DNF, but it's not because I will finish it eventually. I just want to be in the correct mood when I do and do the series justice. Next book that I attempted to read was Read a Book Not Set in This Time Period, and that was The English Wife by Lauren Willig. I did not finish this one either. I like so failed at Spookathon. With this one, it was kind of the same thing. I really struggled with the writing style. I got about 50 pages in. I struggled a lot with the author's writing style, and I really wasn't in the mood. It was kind of a slow moving, I mean, the first chapter like starts out with a bang, but then it kind of really slows down. And I was in a mood where I wanted some fast-paced books, and this was definitely not it. And the writing style just didn't really jive with me. And with it being almost a 400-page book, I DNF'd it. I don't know. I'm not going to get rid of it. I might give it a try later when I'm in the mood. This is definitely a fall-type read because it takes place during the fall-winter time and just very atmospheric in that way. But if I don't get through it again, then I'm just going to chalk it up to I just don't really enjoy the author's writing style. The first one that I read for Spookathon, and this actually covers a couple challenges. It covers read a thriller, read a book with purple on the cover, and it technically could go with read a book not set in this time period. So if I do all that, plus with the I Hate Fairyland, then the only one I didn't really complete would read a book with a spooky word in the title. So I guess it could be, I could say it's kind of like a half win. But that book is The Lies We Told by Camilla Way. This was a really good book. I rated it 4 stars. It's a very fast-paced read. This book is about a girl named Clara. She's like in her 20s, like early 20s, and she's been dating this guy named Luke for over a year now. They're like totally in love, perfect couple, live together, whole 9 yards. Well, he disappears one day, and nobody can find him. And so she, of course, gets with his best friend Mac, and they're trying to figure out where the hell did he go. So the story kind of goes from there. And you have 2 separate time periods. You have a time period from back in the 80s, like early 80s, and then now. So that's where set in a different time period. But that's a different perspective timeline with different characters. That follows a woman named Beth, and she's talking about her daughter Hannah. And her daughter Hannah, like, is not, there's something wrong with her is what she says. There's something wrong with my daughter Hannah. You can clearly tell as you're reading it that she's a sociopath. And so you kind of follow that mom's journey, like realizing her daughter is a sociopath and what do we do with her? You know, we're scared of her. We don't want her to hurt anybody kind of deal. And then you have the other timeline with Clara trying to find Luke. And of course, these 2 storylines intercept about, God, I think it was a little bit more than halfway. I think it was like 3/4 of the way through before they finally kind of connected. Between like halfway and 3/4 of the way through, they finally connected. It was a really fast-paced read. I called a lot of the twists. There wasn't really that many like, oh my god, shocker twist. It was very much a domestic thriller in the end. Like, more, I thought it was more going to be kind of like spooky scary. It wasn't. It was very much more domestic thriller. But it was really good. I liked the way it was told and how they kind of came together. Though, the character of Hannah, I really wanted more of her. Like, I got kind of tired of Clara. And Hannah's a twisted character, so I really wanted more of her. And you get a little bit of her perspective as well, but it wasn't enough. Like, I like those kind of out there characters, and I really wanted more of her. But this was a solid 4 stars. I highly recommend it. It's a really fast-paced read. I think it's literally 300 pages, like on the nose. Yeah, like 300 on the nose. Really, really good book. I highly recommend it. A couple of books that I read was for Maddie over at the Book Pusher for her ReadAthon Booathon, and I did better at this ReadAthon. I actually read 1, 2, 3. I read 3 books out of the 4 that I wanted to, so I consider that a win. 3 books in a week is a win for me, and especially since one of them was pretty decent size, I considered it a win. I didn't do really well with an adaptation. I was doing Interview with the Vampire audiobook, but like I just could not get into the audiobook, and it just might be audiobooks for me, but I watched the movie instead, so that counts because that was part of her thing, but I didn't actually read it or listen to it. I didn't do anything for the spirit prompt. I was going to try to read Sweet Pea, but then I ran out of time because I got really busy last week, but so that one got kind of pushed back on my TBR. Enchanting, I guess I can call one of these books Enchanting. But then the first prompt was read a book with orange in the cover, and I read Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And I did actually finish it. On Halloween at like 4 p.m. or something like that. I read it in 2 days. So I read a 600-page book in 2 days. Granted, with Illuminae, it is all, if you can see that, it is, hopefully that focuses, it's all mixed media. So it goes really fast. I mean, there's some pages, like especially towards the end, where like they're mostly black and the text is just, I mean, so it was a really fast read. Almost everybody on BookTube has already read the Illuminae files. I was kind of late to the game because I'd gotten the book on my e-reader, and the formatting just didn't work because with all of the mixed media, it kind of threw off the proportions, so it just wasn't as fun to read. So I got this off a book outlet, and I loved it. So if you didn't know, Illuminae is kind of like a space odyssey, kind of. From what I didn't know, which I learned from reading on Goodreads after I finished, is that Gemina and Obsidio, which are books 2 and 3 in the trilogy, are like companion novels. So they have some of the characters from Illuminae, and they kind of join up with each other as they move. So the 2 characters in Illuminae show up in Gemina and meet up with the 2 main characters from Gemina, and then they go on and meet up with the other 2 characters in Obsidio. So they're companion, but they're also all streamed together, which is kind of awesome because you get a new story every time. But this is about Katie and Ezra, and they live on a planet, Carenza, I think is how it's pronounced, and it's like this little ice planet out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like a mining planet, an illegal mining planet, and this big corporation comes in and attacks them one morning, and so they're all fighting for their lives and trying to get out. They get on these, you know, escape ships, and they go up, and their distress signals were heard by one ship, so the Alexander, and they show up to help them. So they've got, both ships are overloaded, so they've got 3 ships. One is just a science vessel, the other one's a cargo ship, and then the Alexander, which is a battleship, and they're all overloaded with all these civilians that were saved from the planet. So Ezra's on one ship, he's on the Alexander, and Katie is on the other ship. Why can't I remember the name of the other ship? Starts with a B. Why can't I remember what it's called? She's on a different ship. Well, Ezra gets co-signed into the military to fly ships, like, what are they even called? Kind of like Valkyries, whatever, to fly them, you know, shooter ships to help defend the ship. And then she pretends to be dumb so they don't know how smart she is, but she's a hacker. She's a computer hacker. So the whole story is them trying to get back together because they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and they literally broke up the day of the attack on their planet. So they're trying to get back together even though they're on 2 separate ships, and they're all traveling together because the science vessel and the other cargo ship can't travel alone because they have nothing to defend themselves when that other battleship that attacked their planet, the only surviving one, is following them to kill them. So the whole thing is very tense, and you feel like you're right there with them. There were so many nods to other science fiction things. Like, there's a huge nod to Star Wars. Like, there's, like not a text message, but an IM messages between the 2 main characters. And one of them says, "I love you," and the other one says, "I know," which is a total nod to Han Solo and Leia in the Star Wars series. And I love that. That was so cute to see that little nod to them. It also has a nod to A Space Odyssey, because there is a crazy AI, only this one's not named Hal, it's named Aiden. Though Aiden to me, like, yes, he's psycho and he's kind of murderous, but he's different than Hal. Like, I found myself, like, feeling for him. It's such a good story. Like, it's just really good authors. Like, Jay Kristoff is my god. Like, I just, oh. I already have a hold on Gemina in the library. Though my library does not have Obsidio, which is absolutely asinine. Like, I don't understand why. And if they don't, and I'm going to read it, then I'm going to have to buy Obsidio in order to read the whole trilogy. Which then, if that's the case, I might as well buy Gemina. Because what's the point of having book 1 and 3 without book 2? Seriously, book nerd problems. But Illuminae was 5 stars. Can't wait to read Gemina. I can't believe I waited this long to read the dang book. Next one was to read a book that is a retelling, or read a retelling. So I read The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. I think if I tilt it down this way, you can kind of see the cover without the glare from, you know, my natural light. This book was really good. I don't know why people think it's so polarizing, because I don't think it is. It's by Kirsten White, who wrote... she's the same author as the one that did And I Darken and that whole trilogy, the Vlad and the Impaler retelling trilogy. But this book was phenomenal, and it's not that long. I read it in 2 sittings, I think, but I was really drawn in. The first half of the book, I'm going to set it down because it glares. The first half of the book is kind of slow character development. We follow Elizabeth, who is... She, I don't know if she's an orphan. I guess she's considered an orphan. Her mother died and her dad's in prison. And so she's living with this terrible family, and the Frankensteins come and, like, adopt her and take her on as a ward because they're worried about their son Victor, as in Victor von Frankenstein. Like, they're worried about him. He's weird. He's awkward. He likes to mutilate animals. He doesn't do well socially with other kids. So they literally take her in to be his friend, and she knows that if she doesn't befriend Victor, she's not going to have anywhere to go, and she doesn't want to go back to that abusive house that she was living in, and the Frankensteins are rich, so of course she wants to do everything she can to stay. So to me, like, I mean, and this story takes off from there. You have flashbacks to the past, because where it takes place now, she's 17 years old, and Victor's like 19 or 20, he's a little bit older than her, so you have present time, and then you have back when they were children and growing up and how they got to where they are. And they are both some of the most interesting characters. A lot of people kind of hated on Elizabeth, but I didn't. Like, I see where she was coming from. Like, yeah, she's kind of vicious and she's all about doing stuff for herself, but she's an orphan. Like, the Frankensteins are all she has. If she doesn't do what she needs to do to stay, she'll be homeless on the street with nothing. So I understand why she did what she did, or what some of her motives were. Victor is one of the most twisted characters I've ever read. Like, she did an amazing job with Victor. He is super twisted. But if you know the original Frankenstein really well, that part of the story, that retelling part, doesn't kick in until about midway. But the way the author did it was so good, because she took things and made them her own. And I love that the main protagonist was a female. But to me, this book was a lot about, like, what happens to a person. Like, it's about humanity, which the original Frankenstein is about humanity, and what does it mean to be human, you know, because the monster, is he really human? You know, like, he has some of the human urges, and it's, what does it mean to be a human being? And Kirsten White did it in a way where she took a twist on that, and to me, or I took it as, what does it mean to be a person who centers their entire life around somebody else? When your only purpose in life that you've made for yourself is to be what this person wants you to be, to keep where you're at. And that's what Elizabeth does. She molds herself into exactly what Victor likes and wants, because she's so scared of not having a place to go. So what does that do to a person? What does that do to your head when all your whole purpose in life is to please this person, and overlooking some of the crappy things they do or crappy parts of their personality? Like, you overlook all of that just to make sure that you stay where you're at. And I mean, it also plays into abusive relationships. A lot of people who are in abusive relationships do the same thing. Change who they are to please that other person so they don't get beat. This was kind of the same thing. She changed who she was as a person to be what Victor wanted her to be, so she'd had a place to go. And eventually, when she realizes her mistake in doing so, that's when, like, the shit hits the fan. And it's really good. I loved the ending. I think I gave it 4 stars. I might have given it 5. I can't remember. I gave it 4 or 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. Like, I've only heard good things about it. Like, a couple of booktubers that I watch has said that, oh, one, Heather over at Bookables didn't really like it at all. She gave it like 3 stars. She thought it was kind of middle of the road, or not anything special. But I really liked it. And for a YA, it was really good. Like, I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to read more by her. Like, she's got one coming out called Slayer, which is, like, takes place in the Buffyverse, which makes my geek flag just, like, Buffy's my favorite TV show ever in the entire world, so I can't wait to get my hands on that book. But that doesn't come out until January. And then the last book I read for BooAthon the prompt was Dealer's Choice, get a recommendation from another booktuber, and then read it and shout them out. So I asked Vicky over at Chapter 32, who is, like, one of my best friends here on BookTube, and she was so nice and gave me a really great recommendation. And so I read Cold Moon Over Babylon by Michael McDowell. I had to get this on ebook because he died in 1999, so all of his books are out of print. Though they are reprinting a lot of his books because he didn't have that many. But they're reprinting them so more people can get their hands on them. I read The Elementals by him last year and enjoyed it. I like this one a lot better. I gave it 4 stars, I believe. Maybe 5 stars. God. I mean, it was a good reading month if I could remember what the heck I rated things. But Cold Moon Over Babylon is a really quick, fast-paced ghost story. It's a ghost revenge story. So you follow kind of like this town. I don't want to... There's multiple, like, protagonists, but it kind of switches around because you're following this tiny little town called Babylon. And it's on, like, the Florida Panhandle, like, right by... Is it the Arkansas or Alabama border? I'm bad at geography. I can't remember. But I know it's in the Florida Panhandle, but it's right near the borders. And it follows this really tiny town, and, like, how do I describe it without ruining it or giving away spoilers? So originally you follow this little tiny family, like, on their blueberry farm, and it's a grandma and her 2 grandkids. The grandkids are, well, the son is an adult. He is, like, in his very early 19, 20, something like that. And the daughter's, like, or the little girl's, like, 14. And so, like, it follows them. And then stuff happens to them, and so then it switches from their perspective to the bad guy's perspective. And, you know, the river is a really main focus, because the river is black, and it's dirty, and it's gross, and it's like bad juju comes from the river. But then these people come back as ghosts, and they're taking revenge on the main murderer bad guy, which I'm not going to say who it is, because that is a total spoiler, because you don't... I mean, you can probably guess who it is, but you're not told until at least over 100 pages in, so, like, I don't want to ruin it. But it was a really cool, twisted ghost story, very gothic feeling, gothic southern feeling, really creepy. I mean, considering it was written, I think, in the 80s, it's not campy or cheesy. It's very, very atmospheric, and I love those gothic horror, and I love watching the killer get theirs. So, I highly recommend. You can get it on ebook. You can also buy the paperback through Amazon, the reprints of the paperbacks, and they've got really nice, cool new covers. But I want to thank Vicky for recommending it to me. Like, I don't know why I didn't think I may not enjoy it as much. I liked The Elementals. Why wouldn't I like his other one? And of course, after buying it, reading it, I immediately bought 2 of his other ones, The Amulet and Gilded Needles. So I'll read those eventually down the road. But yes, go read Michael McDowell's work. He's an underrated horror author that, because he's been gone for so long, not many people have read him. Go read him if you haven't. Okay, guys, that's it. That is my October wrap-up. I read, let's see, 1, 2, 3, I think I read 8 when I counted yesterday. 8.5, if you count, like, these 2s as halves, like 8.5, something like that. I don't know. Somewhere in that range. 8.5, 9 books. But for me, that was a pretty good reading month, considering I did 2 readathons. I think I did fairly well. I did better at BooAthon than I did Spookathon, obviously. But I had so much fun doing a readathon. The push to, like, read more and having that set TBR really helped. If you've read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments. I'm curious to know what you've thought. Let me know if you participated in BooAthon or Spookathon and what you guys read. And I will see you guys later. Bye.